I have only 5 words for you.
From my cold, dead hands.
It's time for Gun Radio Utah. No apologies. A show dedicated to preserving and protecting your constitutional right to bear arms for your security and sport. Here's your host, well-known gun rights advocate and chairman of the Utah Shooting Sports Council, Clark Aposhian.
Welcome to Gun Radio Utah. There are no apologies on this show. Hey, Bill, you arranged for a fantastic guy that we've been talking with, Len Morales, right? You want to tell us about what's coming up in third segment?
Yeah, Len Morales, and we were talking about this last week of a way to track your firearms, and you gave me a challenge to find a decent app or a decent program that could track your purchases, your serial numbers, your firearms, pictures, blah, 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 of everything you've got. So you've got a good history, a good record, not a history, but a good record of what you own. And we came across a killer project, and we immediately called up the owner, the founder of, and said, "Hey, this is impressive. We want to get you on the show. We got some questions."
We're not just gonna let you walk out of here. Who's we, sucker? Smith & Wesson and me.
Gun Radio Utah is back. Talk Radio 105.9 KNRS. Here's your host, Clark Aposhian.
And welcome back to Gun Radio Utah, where there are never any apologies done. Keeping in line with that, Bill, you know, we have been looking for, I posed you a problem that said, I want to keep track. What's the best app that, and I gave you a whole list of things that I wanted. And last week, I think it was last week, or maybe just before that, I said, and you got on there and you got looking and you came up with one. And I said, no, that ain't going to do it because it doesn't do this. And then another app to keep track of firearms. And there was another one, and there was another one. And finally, you happened on an app called GUNTRACK.APP, or excuse me, GUNTRACK. You can get it at GUNTRACK.APP. But joining us here, Bill, why don't you introduce Len and tell him how you found him? Yeah,
so Len Morales, welcome to the show, Gun Radio Utah. And we came across this app, and luckily enough, we found a phone number and thought, well, let's give this company a call. And I'll be darned, Len, you answer your own phone calls. That was very impressive.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on, guys.
Yeah. Now this was amazing because as we talked last week, of course, and we started uncovering quite a bit of things. As gun owners, whether they're hobbyists or collectors or, maybe they're just recreational shooters, they don't have a lot of firearms. You offer something here that's very unique and different from most what I would call inventory tracking applications in regards to the firearms. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the company and the inspiration of how this all came about.
Sure. Well, it really started, and it was in a gun shop buying a pistol, and it was a very reputable shop here in Arizona, where I live. And the guy ringing up the sale said, you better take a photograph of this thermal receipt because over time it will fade. Mm-hmm. And it got me to thinking right then and there, as I took a photograph of the receipt, I'm thinking, well, there's got to be a better way. I was keeping a spreadsheet in my home office of all of my inventory, and if anybody has ever tried this, it's cumbersome to keep up, and you maybe have pieces of information here and there, but you don't really have a concise record. And I'm not good at having my computer with me when I'm, doing maintenance or cleaning or anything like that. So it's really started that day. I came back and I actually called my insurance company because I was curious about, what type of records they wanted in the event I had a total loss. And I had an additional rider on my home insurance for my inventory. Mm-hmm. And they told me they'd want receipts, they'd want condition, use. If you had photographs, the better, in order to get, the highest amount for each one. And it really, that point was, being in the industry for going on 25 years now. This is what I've done for a living. I've helped companies build these types of applications and databases. I figured, you know what, this is a labor of love of mine. I'm going to go ahead and build something that will solve this problem. And so that's kind of the instigator, was really that day in the gun shop when the guy told me to keep this record safe.
Right. And you know, it's interesting because as I'm looking at your website, I'm looking at the features page, and I can tell you didn't stop with just firearm documentation, serial number, receipts, photographs, because I'm looking at not only firearms, but you've got ammunition, accessories, shooting, the different types of shooting activities, the rounds, targets, the ranges, maintenance, the type of maintenance on it, malfunctions with the firearms as well. And then you've got all this additional real-time record information.
Right. And that's one unique aspect. And as I was doing my research, Bill, and I did the same thing. I went online, I started downloading apps for keeping gun records or firearm records. And that was the one item that I didn't see that existed, is that real-time feedback. In other words, everything being tied together. It all starts with the firearm record. Once you input that record and then you add ammo for that particular caliber, it'll actually list under that firearms record how much ammo you have for that particular firearm. In addition to that, as you add shooting events, it will actually subtract that from your ammo that you use for that firearm. So everything
nice.
in real time, and it actually gets down to the cost per round. So it'll actually calculate. And one of the objectives for me was to have a running total of my inventory and my investment. And it's kind of funny because a lot of guys have come back to me and said, hey, you know what, if the apocalypse ever does happen, at least I'll know what to trade and what not to trade and how much I have in ammo and what it's worth. And it's kind of interesting to me, but it's been something that I want to even expand on a little more, maybe the dynamics behind the real-time pricing, and maybe even add additional elements to that.
So I got to tell you, Lynn, that your app, GunTrack, and it's TRACK, so GUNTRACK, GunTrack. Just find it at GUNTRACK.APP. So not .com, but .app. It checks all the boxes and more. Because I hadn't even thought about maintenance on there. I hadn't thought about taking pictures of the receipts. I hadn't thought about you have a way to track your overall investment in that firearm. And one of the things that a lot of folks don't really think about is that, they go to the gun store and they see a sale, or they go to the gun show and they see all this kind of different things. And you say to yourself, do I need a inside the waistband holster for such and such a gun? Do I have one for that? Do I not have one for that? I can track that. How much ammo do I have how much full metal jacket ammo do I have for a 9mm? How much 55 grain do I have for a 5.56? So on and so forth. And I can literally just look and see what I need right there and what I already have. And the other thing is, you talked about insurance companies and policies. Another big one is not with insurance, but when someone dies, if they had their firearm records in this, I got to tell you, having dealt with death in our family before and firearms, that's a huge thing. This would be a huge aspect that wouldn't be that would make it so much easier for the remaining spouse and family members to have this all there. Now, I got to ask you, and so your thoughts on that, and then I'm going to ask you about safety and security with it.
No, it's an amazing, incredible point, Clark. That's definitely something that, and I've actually been approached by a couple of users now who have lost, or one guy in particular, he had his 1911 that he kept in his truck stolen. And he was just trying out my app for the first time. He said he inputted that one particular firearm in his database. He had to contact me because he had already forgotten his password. He never used his app at all. He was just testing it. Well, lo and behold, he was able to retrieve his firearm, at least because he had his serial number and he had no other records of that firearm. He had owned it for 30 years.
Wow.
So it was it's definitely an interesting concept when you have a loss, or like you said, if somebody does pass and they have that estate ready to be either divided or left to somebody else.
So that's
Okay, so
another
now
question I was going to ask real quick here is gun trusts. For some of us that have, suppressors, short-barreled rifles, fully automatic weapons like the guy at the
hell
bottom
you
of the
say,
screen.
Bill.
Exactly.
The hell you say.
Can we add that type of information in here as well?
Yes, and one of the new enhanced features that we added to the desktop version of the app is the ability to create custom categories. So if you have suppressors, or if you want to follow your tax stamps, or anything in between that.
Right. Okay.
Nice. So
I
copies
like
of
it.
them right there. Okay, now I got a major question here. All that data, all my guns, my serial numbers, photos of these guns, and is all in there. Is it safe? Is it secure? How do we guarantee that?
Yes, and that's been a fundamental issue with all gun users, including myself, firearm owners, and it's not going away anytime soon. We want better security. We always want to stay ahead of the curve, and that's exactly what we've been doing from day one. Privacy and data use is number one, paramount to my mission. We do not share data. We do not have any kind of tracking applications. Nothing is included that will violate your privacy.
Okay, so from a responsible person standpoint, what do you think about this? If somebody wants to be a responsible firearm owner, your thoughts on that? Because I know that we had talked before, that kind of went into while you were developing this app.
And it's a very interesting concept, because as we all know, what we're faced with in the firearms community is that you have to almost prove responsibility in certain cases. And I've spoken to law enforcement guys now, and they say this app can help me prove that I am more responsible in my training. For instance, I can show and prove that I've been training for the last 7 weeks, and here are the results. I wouldn't have overshot. I wouldn't have done, they can clearly articulate based on these records and prove that they've been training. So there are ways to prove responsibility in addition to just accounting for every single round, accounting for every single pistol, accounting for every single rifle that you own. Who else does that if you're not responsible? I can tell you the adversaries, or the guys that don't care about it, they don't do that.
Yeah,
So
they have a
Bill
hard
had
time
talked to
finding
me-
the serial number in the first place.
Bill had talked to me earlier about encryption and that, and
Yes.
levels of encryption and that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that is a release that we're actually working on right now. It's AES 256-bit encryption. So end to end, and you're going to be asked when you sign into your account that you have to create a passphrase. That passphrase will be the encryption key that will open up your data. If you lose that, unfortunately, you're going to lose the data. And we're going to have different levels in future releases that you can safeguard against losing that. But the 256-bit encryption is the same encryption that the U.S. government uses for classified information. They say it takes millions of years to break, so it hasn't been, there's no breaking it.
Yeah, it's that Reindahl
okay.
type of encryption that they use there. So yeah, AES 256, very well known here, and very well. I'm glad to hear that. Clark, you had a thought there?
So GUNTRACK.APP, if you go to GUNTRACK.APP, GUNTRACK.APP, and I imagine it's available on the Google Play Store probably too?
Yes, both Play Store
Okay.
and the iOS.
How
Apple
much
Store.
for all this stuff? How much for the whole shebang? All the tracking, the photos, the serial numbers, the maintenance, the ammo, the everything. What's the cost?
Well, the pricing on the desktop starts at $299 a month, and the annual fee on that is under $30. It's $29 a month. I mean, a year. I'm sorry. And that will get you about 50 to 60,000 is what we quantified with some sample inputs. About $50 to $60,000 in inventory for the $30 a year package, and that's the starter package. And then it goes up from there to essential, and it's based on the real-time usage, that the transactions that you do on the database. It's really the space that you're consuming in your account that dictates the price. But for most people, the advanced is going to be probably last you several years before you even get.
Fantastic.
Super.
Len Morales, GUNTRACK.APP. We're going to have you back on after I get a chance to really get into this thing and delve into it. But we just got about 10 seconds left in this segment. So, Len Morales, GUNTRACK.APP, thank you so much for being on Gun Radio Utah.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I'm really grateful to be here.
And we'll be right back. So stay tuned to Gun Radio Utah.